The Tale of the Fisherman and the Demon. It is told in the chronicles of old, by the silken-voiced weavers of stories who heard it from their forefathers, that once, in an age long vanished, there lived a fisherman, aged and impoverished, yet devout, a man of honest ways who would not stoop to fraud nor turn aside into error. With his wife and 3 children, he dwelt in a mean wooden hut upon the shore. He believed that sustenance came from the hand of the merciful, and that his toil was less a trade than a divine ordinance. 4 times only in a day would he cast his net, no more, no less. Should fish be caught at the first or second venture, he gave thanks and went home content. And if, on the 4th trial, his net still rose empty from the sea, he would not trouble the waters further but murmured to himself, "It is not my portion today. Another shall eat the bread that heaven has measured out for me." Then, even with nothing in his hands, he went home grateful still, reminding himself that each man consumes only the share appointed to him, and that those who yield to greed and drive themselves through fire and water win nothing but heavier burdens for their pains. It chanced one morning the old man came to the sea, set his net upon the waters, and waited. When he hauled upon the rope, he found it so ponderous that no strength of his could move it. He drove a stout stake into the sand, tied the rope fast, and himself went down into the water, straining till at last he dragged the net ashore. But what he found was not fish, nor yet treasure, but the carcass of a dead ass. His face clouded a moment, then he said, "Lord, your wisdom is beyond my knowing. If a donkey is my lot today, so be it." And once more he cast the net. The second time, again it weighed heavy. Again he bound the rope to the stake, again he went into the water. This time it held a great jar. His heart leapt, for he thought it must be filled with silver and gold, or jewels without price. With much labor he drew it out, only to discover the jar brimmed with stones and mud. Yet he did not curse nor scowl, but, like a man playing a game whose rules he accepts, flung the net again. The 3rd cast yielded nothing better, some broken bottles and shards of glass. Still the fisherman's brow did not darken. He muttered, "So be it. One last chance remains," and for the 4th time he spread the net upon the waters. When at length he dragged it to land, he found again a jar, but of strange aspect, sealed round with thick hide, upon which was stamped in 4 places the seal of Solomon. At this, the old man rejoiced. "Now, thanks be to God," he cried, "for surely this is the treasure of Solomon the prophet, sent at last to relieve my need." He shook the jar, expecting to hear the chink of coins within, but it gave forth no sound. "Perhaps," he said, "it contains a map or some secret mark of buried treasure." He drew a knife, cut the hide, and lifted the lid. Instantly a smoke poured forth, curling upward, till it spread across the sky. The fisherman sighed, "So it is decreed, this day my wife and children must go hungry." He bent to gather his net. But as he did, the smoke gathered itself into a monstrous shape, a vast and dreadful demon, who stood before the fisherman and bowed, saying in a voice that shook the air, "O mighty prophet Solomon, pardon my trespass. Spare me, and I swear I shall no more disobey, nor rebel." The fisherman answered astonished, "Solomon, I am but an old fisherman, no prophet. 1,000 years and more have passed since Solomon returned to the mercy of God. At this, the demon gave a hideous laugh. All the better. Since thou art no Solomon, prepare to answer for thy deeds, thy hour draws near. The fisherman's face turned ashen. What? Is this my reward? I drew you out from the prison where you lay 1,000 years beneath the sea, and you would bring me ruin for my pains. O demon, is it your custom to repay kindness with evil? Should you not rather reward me and show me where some secret hoard of yours lies buried? The demon's countenance darkened, and he thundered, Enough of idle pleas. I cannot break my oath. Yet in courtesy, I grant thee one thing. Choose the manner in which thou shalt meet thy judgment. The fisherman, trembling, fell to his knees and wept, But O ungrateful slave of God! The fisherman, pale with dread, asked, What has befallen you, O spirit, that you are become so rancorous, so merciless? The demon replied, My tale is long. If thou hearken, thou shalt judge for thyself that I am justified in the course I propose. The fisherman, shrewd in his simplicity, saw at once the advantage. If he could coax the spirit into telling its tale, his doom would at least be deferred, and who could say but that in the length of the telling some chance of escape might yet present itself? So, he answered with guile, Fate is fate. What matters it in what manner it comes? First tell me your story. Afterward, do with me as you will. The demon began, When Solomon was raised by God to be his prophet upon the earth, he summoned all creatures, men and spirits, beasts of the field and birds of the sky, even the smallest ant that creeps in the dust, to worship the Almighty. All obeyed save a few of us, I, and certain demons and jinn, spurned his command. In pride I lifted myself in rebellion. Then Solomon sent his vizier, Asaph son of Barkiah, who bade me come with promise of safety. I obeyed. There Solomon admonished me, and said, If thou wilt not believe, yet forswear thy revolt, lead not other spirits into rebellion. But I, in my folly, answered with insolence, If thou art a prophet of God, then I am prince of the demons, and I will neither bow to thee, nor worship thy Lord, rather will I strive with thee to the end. Hardly had the words left my mouth when Solomon commanded. They brought a brazen jar, and ere I could resist, thrust me within. Over its mouth they stretched the hide of an ox, and Solomon set his seal upon it fourfold. By his order I was cast into the deep. There I lay imprisoned in that narrow vessel, and in my anguish I vowed, Whosoever shall free me, to him will I grant all the hidden treasures of the earth. 700 years passed, no hand came. My heart grew bitter, and I swore anew, Whosoever now releases me shall be made to answer to me, for he has delayed too long in coming. 400 years more have gone, and now thou hast loosed me. My oath binds me. Thy doom is sealed. Only this I grant thee, choose how thou wouldst see thy sentence fulfilled. But if thou wilt not choose then, in requital for near upon 1,000 years within jar and sea, I shall visit upon thee the sternest of reckonings. And thou didst ask me, fisherman, whether in the spirit world goodness is repaid by good. I answer thee, yes. When men, who call themselves humane, prove themselves strangers to kindness, why should demons, whom ye reckon monsters, be expected to show gratitude? The fisherman saw that no pleading would avail. The iron heart of the demon was not to be softened. So he turned in his mind to craft and cunning, and presently spoke with another tone. Well then, if you are resolved upon my undoing, I yield. The choice I leave in your hands. Only, before my end, grant me one question. The demon growled. What is it? The fisherman said, Tell me truly, with all your might, why do you lie? You boast that you sprang from this little jar, and I know it cannot be so. At this the demon roared in anger. Lies! What falsehood have I uttered? You expect me to believe, said the fisherman, that a giant such as you, vast as a mountain, was contained within this small jar. No, I saw you coming from afar, a cloud of smoke drifting upon the sea. This tale of yours is mere invention. If you are indeed the king of demons, why stoop to lies? Lies are born of fear and ignorance. What have you to do with them? The demon snarled, Didst thou not see me rise forth in smoke from that very vessel? I tell thee I was confined there for 1,100 years. The fisherman laughed bitterly. I cannot believe it. It is beyond all reason. The demon, enraged, cried, Foolish old man, must I prove it to thee? Look then, and doubt no more. At once his monstrous frame dissolved into vapor, which streamed down into the jar until nothing was left but a thin wisp curling above the mouth. Then, with a rush, even that vanished within. Quick as thought, the fisherman snatched up the ox-hide, set it fast upon the jar, and bound it round with stout rope, the seals of Solomon still plain upon it. Then he burst into laughter and cried aloud, See now, demon? You were angered when I called you a liar, and in your pride you rushed back into the very prison from which I freed you. Truly lying is a shameful art, for it has trapped you twice over. Tell me, cruel spirit, do you wish me to fling you again into the sea, or shall I hide you in some cavern of the mountain, where no living thing will ever set eyes on you again? And now it is shown how wit and cunning may oft prove a sharper blade than steel. For that very demon, who but a moment before had scorned the fisherman's pleas and with cruel heart sought his life, now cast himself down in supplication, weeping and wailing, and said, O noble fisherman, if thou but lift the strip of hide sealed with Solomon's signet, and suffer me forth, I swear to grant thee all the treasures I know, and enrich thee beyond measure. Only release me from this narrow prison. Hadst thou not been wise and set again the prophet's seal upon the jar, never would I have been ensnared. But the power of heaven and Solomon's seal were against me, my magic failed, and I was helpless. Grant me freedom, and I will set thee master of boundless wealth. But the fisherman answered, Your entreaties avail nothing with me, ungrateful spirit. Nor do I crave riches, for great treasure is no bringer of ease, but of calamity. Nay, I will not free you. Our lot is much like that of King Yearn and the sage of Ruin. The demon said, If thou wilt not unseal the jar, then at least tell me the tale of King Yearn and the sage of Ruin, ere thou castest me into the sea. For if I lie beneath the waves, some faint hope of deliverance remains, but if thou consign me to a cavern deep within the mountain, there shall be no escape forever. The fisherman replied, In times long past, in the land of Persia between Dalam and Tabaristan, there lay a province called Ruin. Over that realm ruled a prince by the name of King Yearn. Now it so befell that King Yearn was visited by a pale affliction, and fair patches appeared upon his skin and countenance, troubling him deeply and robbing his visage of its former grace. Yet no physician in all that country could avail him, save for the sage of Ruin. But the sage had long since vanished to an unknown dwelling, and no man knew where he might be found. Then King Yearn dispatched messengers to the ends of his dominion, and heralds proclaimed through every town and quarter, "Whosoever shall find the sage of Ruin, and bring him to the court of King Yearn, shall be rewarded with a bounty of gold." At length the heralds came to a certain city, and halted before the dwelling of the sage, who had retired there in seclusion. He was a man learned not only in Persian, Arabic, and Hindi, but had lately applied himself to the tongues of the Greeks and Romans. Hearing the proclamation, the sage pondered deeply, and resolved on the morrow to set forth for Ruin, and present himself before the king. So it was that on the next day he came to the palace gates, and said to the guards, "Tell your sovereign that the physician seeks leave to enter." When word reached King Yearn, he himself hastened on foot from the inner chambers to the palace gate, though the distance was great, and taking the sage by the hand, led him in with joy and reverence. And there he laid bare the affliction that had beset him. When the monarch would have set forth the particulars of his affliction, the sage forestalled him, saying, "Spare yourself the telling, O king, for the nature of your malady is plain to me, and so too its cure. I give you glad tidings. Soon shall your skin be free of stain, and your face unblemished as in youth." The king, overjoyed, asked, "Is it by a draught I must drink, or by an ointment to be spread upon my body?" The sage replied, "Neither. Only grant me one day's grace. I know of your fondness for the game of chagan, and I counsel that you prepare for a match on the morrow. Yet do not ride forth until I come again to the palace." The king, astonished, inquired, "What has a game of chagan to do with the patches that torment me?" "Tomorrow," said the sage, "before you ride, I shall make clear." The king swore, "If your promise be fulfilled, I will heap such riches upon you that you shall want for nothing." But the sage, as he departed, said only, "Not for wealth do I labor, but for treasure laid up in the world to come." Straightway he returned to his dwelling in the neighboring town, and on the road purchased a mallet for the royal game of chagan. At dawn he came again to the palace, where the king awaited him. He placed the mallet in the monarch's hand and said, "Play today with this alone. Grip it tightly, open not your fist until the match be done, and rest not until the sweat pours from you, so that your garments are drenched. Then hasten to the baths, wash yourself oft with hot water, and suffer the bathman to knead and rub your flesh with vigor. Afterward, lie in bed one full day, and let not the wind touch your skin. By the morrow's eve when I return, not a trace of your sickness will remain." King Yearn obeyed in every detail. He rode and played until the sun was low, his robes soaked with sweat. He bathed as instructed, endured the strong rubbing of the bathman, and slept through the night and the following day. At sunset, the sage returned, and beholding the king's face cried, "Praise be to God, the cure is complete." The king called for a mirror, and seeing his countenance free of every blemish, rose up in delight, embraced the sage, and covered his head and hands with kisses. Then he said, "Tell me, I pray you, what mystery lies in this? How was my healing wrought by a mallet?" The sage answered, "I had steeped the handle of the mallet in a special potion. When your hand sweated with play, the potion entered your body through the pores, mingling with your blood. With the labor of the game, it coursed through your veins and slew the tiny creatures that were the cause of your disease. Their corruption was expelled with your sweat when you washed, and the rubbing of the bathman drove out what remained beneath the skin. Thus was your cure accomplished. But the secret of the potion itself none may learn save by years of study and toil among the herbs of the field. Hear then my counsel, O king. Let exercise and the bathman's strong hands be your daily regimen, for the business of rule breeds anger, greed, and passion, and all these breed poison in the body. By such means you shall guard your health. The king rejoiced exceedingly, and that very night ordered a banquet. Musicians played, singers sang, and the courtiers danced for joy. By dawn the whole land, from Tabaristan in the east to Daylem in the west, had heard how King Yearn was cleansed of his affliction in a single day by the art of the sage of Ruyan. At the end of the revels, the king himself bestowed 2,000 gold pieces upon the sage, and sent him home in his own carriage of state. He charged him also to return the following week, promising that a fine house should be built for him beside the palace. But the sage of Ruyan, caring naught for gold, kept no treasure in his house save what sufficed for bread and the purchase of herbs. So on the next morning he filled a great sack with the coins, and going forth to the villages near and far, he gave of his bounty to every poor household, until 300 families were saved from hunger and cold that bitter winter. Then, at evening, he returned content to his home. And when the week had passed, a royal carriage once more stood at his door. The sage entered, and at the palace was met by King Yearn with honor, no less than before. The king embraced him fondly, and together they sat at the head of a banquet held in celebration of his wisdom. There, the king questioned him at length upon many matters, not only of potion but of all knowledge, and the sage answered patiently, and with words so plain that all who heard might understand. King Yearn, noble of spirit and open of hand, had a vizier who was base and ill-willed. Though the sage had healed his sovereign, restoring peace to the court and joy to the palace, yet the vizier, mean of soul and eaten through with envy, could not bear the sight of him. From the very first, when Yearn bestowed upon the healer 2,000 golden coins as gift and honor, the vizier's heart, named Agar Mirza, was seized with such a spasm of jealousy that he could scarce draw breath. And when at the second gathering, he beheld the sage again in the same coarse robe of wool, threadbare and plain, he marveled that a man so rewarded had not arrayed himself in rich attire, nor clothed his limbs in silken raiment. In the splendid assembly, where all were finely dressed and adorned, the healer's simplicity drew the eyes of many, and the malice of the envious vizier. Yet his dignified bearing and wise discourse so captivated the company that none gave thought to his garments, save only that one covetous man. When the gathering was ended, King Yearn bestowed upon the sage yet another 1,000 coins, and sent him home in the royal coach. Once more he invited him to the next week's assembly of discourse, repeating his question, "Will you not abide near my palace, that I may have the boon of your nearness?" The sage replied, "Leave this matter a while. Let some weeks pass, then shall I give my answer, for, O king, not all about you regard me with the same favor as you yourself bestow." Now the jealous vizier, wishing to uncover the dealings of the sage, set spies upon him. And when he saw that the 1,000 coins, as before, were given forth among the poor and the needy, his envy waxed fiercer yet. At last, the day before the third assembly, he sought audience with his lord, and said, "O king, it is the duty of your slave and servant to reveal a truth. This so-called healer, vile at heart, takes the gold you grant him and scatters it among rogues and rabble, stirring up the streets against you. And before your majesty he dares dishonor, appearing in mean attire amidst your nobles. Pardon my boldness, but this is to rear a serpent in one's bosom, and I fear he may at last seek your very life." But King Yunnan, who well knew his vizier's nature, answered, "Why speak with such malice of this venerable man? Had he been my enemy, would he have labored to cure my affliction?" The vizier said, "That sickness, though grievous, threatened not your life, but he may at any hour destroy you by his sorcery. For how else, without potion or ointment, could he have healed you? I swear to you, he is a magician in disguise. Did I not tell your majesty that he has already scattered 3,000 dinars among the rabble? Who can say that he does not prepare the way for your foes, who covet the land of ruin?" Then the vizier urged, "My counsel is this: when next he comes before you, have him seized and bound. Detain him and question him thoroughly, and so wrest from him the truth of why he gives your gold to the scum of the city. I am your loyal eye and your right hand, seeing what escapes your gracious sight." At these words King Yunnan cried aloud, "Peace, vizier! Tempt me not to folly, lest I repent as did King Sinbad, upon whom befell that which I fear may also befall me, should I hearken to words born of envy and spite." The vizier, struck with dread at his lord's wrath, spoke with flattery, "If my lord be not weary, let him tell this humble servant the tale of King Sinbad, that I may learn." King Yunnan, a figure of wisdom yet wearied by the weight of his crown, reclined upon his ornate throne, casting a sidelong glance at his envious vizier. A glimmer of amusement danced in his eyes, tempered by a veil of caution. "Ah, my friend," he began, his voice rich with the cadence of storytelling, "allow me to share a tale that may hold a lesson for you. Once, in the sun-kissed expanses of Persia, there lived a nobleman named Sinbad, whose spirit was as fervent as the blazing sun overhead. He was no ordinary royal, rather, he was a passionate hunter, enchanted by the thrill of the chase. His days were spent pursuing the elusive creatures that roamed his verdant fields. Among his pursuits, he cherished falconry most dearly, possessing a bird of such extraordinary talent and grace that its fame stretched far beyond the borders of his realm. So deep was his affection for this majestic falcon that he had commissioned a delicate cup of gold, adorned with glimmering jewels, to hang from its neck, a vessel for its thirst. On a fateful day, when the sky shimmered like polished azure, Sinbad ventured forth to hunt upon a sprawling plain. Gazelles scattered across the grass like dandelion seeds caught in a gentle breeze, their delicate forms glimmering in the sunlight. Sinbad, a hunter of great skill, commanded his men to form a vast circle, tightening it gradually so that no creature might slip through, either to be taken captive or brought before him by the keen eyes of his falcon. Yet, of all the graceful beings within the circle, only one gazelle, a creature of ethereal beauty, as if the wind itself had shaped her, found herself ensnared. In that moment, Sinbad's voice rang across the plain. "If this gazelle breaks the circle and escapes, the man through whose gap she flees shall forfeit his place at my table." But fate, ever playful, had its own design. The gazelle, sensing the tightening noose, gathered herself and leapt with astonishing poise over the Sinbad's head, rising like a creature born of the air itself. With a grace that rivaled the flight of birds, she vanished into the open plain, leaving Sinbad and his hunters alike in awed silence. In a fit of rage, Sinbad himself took up the chase, sending his falcon into the skies. The powerful bird took flight, swiftly overtaking the fleeing creature, and with a swift strike it struck the gazelle, bringing it down. When Sinbad arrived, he captured the gazelle and claimed it as the trophy of his relentless pursuit. Weary and parched from the exertion, he sought respite beneath a sprawling tree, its leaves whispering secrets in the breeze. There he noticed droplets falling from its branches, glimmering like jewels in the sunlight. With eager hands, he took the golden cup from around his falcon's neck and positioned it beneath the cascading drops. However, just as he raised the cup to his lips, the falcon struck his wrist with its powerful wing, sending the precious liquid spilling to the ground. This happened again and again, until Sinbad, consumed by fury, shouted, "Mad bird! You deny yourself, and you deny me." In a moment of reckless despair, he struck at the falcon, and its wings were harmed, grounding the magnificent bird. Yet, in a final act of loyalty, the falcon directed Sinbad's gaze upward. There, amidst the foliage, he discovered the terrible truth. The droplets were not life-giving water but venom, dripped from the fangs of a serpent coiled above. It was too late. The wounded falcon let out a haunting cry, a sound that reverberated through the air, echoing the lament of the gazelle as it perished. Overcome by remorse, Sinbad stumbled back to his palace, locking himself away in silence, consumed by a deep and abiding regret. In his grief, the cry of the falcon became indistinguishable from the haunting sound of the gazelle's demise. He was left in a state of bewilderment, pondering whether the sound arose from the falcon's final moments, or the ghostly echo of the gazelle's spirit he now seemed to hear once more. "And so," King Yearn concluded, turning his gaze to the malicious vizier, "would you have me condemn to death a wise sage who has restored my honor, to purchase for myself a lifetime of shame and repentance? I shall never heed your venomous advice. I have long known your true nature, and in this brief time, I have come to appreciate the pure-hearted goodness of the sage of Ruin. If I keep you in my court, it is solely because none other in the land can manage the accounts of my divan and attend to the affairs of state. In short, cease your scheming. Do not tempt me, for I will never, at your behest, see a man put to death, nor bring about another's end." But the wicked vizier, undeterred by the tale of Sinbad and the king's command to desist, persisted with his malevolent counsel. "My king," he implored, "I speak solely for your benefit. The craft of the sage of Ruin is that of healing, mine is the art of governance. Beware, for if you reject this counsel, this well-meant advice, you will be led to ruin. He who accepts counsel finds salvation. He who spurns the counsel of a well-wisher invites ruin. O King Yearn, are you not familiar with the tale of the vizier and the king's son?" As the sultan's curiosity piqued, eager to hear the unfolding story of the king and his son, the spiteful vizier began anew. "The tellers of tales, those keepers of ancient lore, recount that an Iranian king, a sovereign among the great rulers of Persia, had a son of striking beauty and youthful charm named Shayan. This youth harbored an insatiable love for the chase, often yearning to partake in the pursuit of game. Yet his father forbade him from hunting alone, always accompanying his cherished son on these thrilling escapades. But as fate would have it, the affairs of the kingdom grew increasingly tangled, leaving the king bereft of leisure for a full month. Relentlessly, the prince implored his father for permission to hunt alone until, at last, the king relented, granting him leave with a caveat. His wise and prudent vizier must accompany the youth on this venture. On the fateful morning of the hunt, the king took his son aside, his voice laden with earnest concern. "I implore you," he urged, "do nothing against the counsel of the vizier, and tread not where he forbids." The weight of his father's words hung in the air, a warning wrapped in paternal love. The first day of the hunt yielded no game, a silence that echoed across the vast plains. Yet on the second day, the prince's keen eye fell upon a gazelle of extraordinary beauty, its gaze fixated upon him from a distance, a vision of grace against the backdrop of the sprawling landscape. He pointed it out to the vizier, his intention clear, but the vizier, sensing an ominous portent, forbade him to pursue it. A struggle of wills ensued. The prince's resolve clashed with the vizier's caution. Ultimately, heedless of the wise man's objections, the prince set off after the gazelle, his heart racing with the thrill of the chase. As he galloped away, the vizier's voice rang out behind him, laced with urgency. "O headstrong prince! Should you find yourself in dire straits, remember to recite the special prayer you utter each night." The prince, though emboldened by his ambition, committed this well-meant warning to memory as he urged his steed onward, the gazelle leading him across the flat expanse. But as he pursued, the creature suddenly vanished, as though it had melted into the very earth itself. Bewildered by its abrupt disappearance, the prince pressed on, his heart pounding with confusion. In the distance, he spotted a girl of surpassing beauty, sitting alone in the midst of the plain, tears glistening like dew upon her cheeks. He approached, reining in his horse, and asked, "Who are you, fair maiden? What brings you to this desolate place, and why do you weep?" The girl looked up, her sorrow palpable. "O prince," she replied, "I am the daughter of King of India. I was hunting with my father and his retinue when I spotted a gazelle. I chased it, but it disappeared without a trace. When I turned back, I found myself utterly alone, lost in this endless wasteland. Would you be so kind as to allow me to ride with you and take me to my father? My horse bolted and left me behind. If you had not come, noble prince, I would have perished here in grief and loneliness." With a heart full of chivalry, the prince helped the lovely maiden onto his horse, and together they galloped eastward in search of her father. After a time, they came upon a stream, and the girl's thirst became apparent. "Prince, I am parched," she said. "Please stop for a moment so I may dismount and drink." He halted his horse and she dismounted, rushing to the stream. But as she splashed water upon her face, a transformation occurred. In an instant, she morphed into a giant, her laughter booming like thunder, echoing across the heavens. "My dear children," she bellowed, "come. I have brought your lunch." At her command, 3 young giants emerged, their grotesque teeth bared in a menacing grin. Terror gripped the young prince as he trembled like a leaf caught in a tempest. Yet, in that moment of impending doom, he recalled the vizier's shouted warning. If he found himself in peril, he must not forget the special nightly prayer. With death looming just a breath away, He recited the prayer with fervor, blowing toward the fearsome giants with each intonation. With the first recitation and breath, the giants froze. By the second, they were rooted to the spot, unable to advance. With each subsequent recitation, they grew thinner and smaller until, by the 10th, both the great giant and her monstrous offspring had vanished entirely, dissolved into the ether. The prince exhaled a profound sigh of relief, his heart racing as he leapt back onto his horse and galloped westward toward his kingdom. On his return, he encountered the vizier, who stood waiting with an anxious escort, his expression a mixture of worry and hope. Upon seeing the prince safe and sound, the vizier raised his hands to the heavens in gratitude. "Thank God," he cried, 100,000 times, "for returning my benefactor's son unharmed." Turning to the prince, he continued, "The difference between us was this. You saw a phantom from a distance and thought it a gazelle. I saw a giant. Thank God your wit and courage saved you today." The weight of wisdom settled upon the prince, a reminder of the delicate balance between ambition and caution. And now, Vizier Agar addressed King Yunan, saying, "You perceive this physician as a mere gazelle, yet I know him to be a formidable giant who covets your very life." Having woven his tale with such vivid color and dramatic flair, the malevolent vizier observed the king's contemplative silence, sensing that his arrow had found its mark. He awaited the king's response with bated breath. King Yunan spoke, "O vizier, your narrative was sweetly spun, and replete with counsel, providing me ample food for thought. Yet I am apprehensive that should I heed your warnings, I might meet the same fate as that merchant, the man who, upon the utterance of a parrot, tragically took the life of his faithful and virtuous wife, only to languish in remorse for the remainder of his days. I shall embrace your counsel for now, but I wish you to hear that tale from my own lips." The vizier, who was named Agar, replied, "What greater honor could there be than for a great king to share a story with his humble vizier as an attentive listener? Pray, commence. I shall hang on your every word." Thus King Yunan began his tale. It is said that there once existed a merchant, a man of considerable wealth and worldly experience, who had traversed the vicissitudes of life. He had journeyed far and wide, witnessing both the splendor and the squalor of the world. Of all his treasures and kin, he held the deepest affection for his beloved wife, Habiba, and for a talking parrot that graced his household. Now there came a time when he was compelled to embark on a journey. On prior occasions, when business had summoned him away from his home, he had entrusted the parrot to his wife Habiba's care, imploring her to tend to it with diligence. Thus, when necessity called him to set sail with a company of merchants once more, he once again entrusted the parrot to her and departed. As for the merchant's wife Habiba, in her solitude she grew increasingly acquainted with the parrot, endeavoring to amuse herself with the wit of the clever bird, seeking to dispel the melancholy that beset her heart. It so happened that the merchant had a servant, a young man who had in secret succumbed to a profound infatuation for Habiba. Yet, out of fear of his master, he confided his feelings to no one, except, that is, during his intervals of cleaning the house, times when Habiba, to avoid the company of a man, not of her kin, would retreat to her mother's abode. The servant, whilst tidying the rooms, would hum softly under his breath, "Habiba, oh Habiba, thee I adore. A love like this, none has known before." Months slipped by. Every fortnight, the servant would come to cleanse the inner quarters, Habiba would depart, and the servant would continue to hum his ardent refrain. Then, at long last, the merchant returned from his travels. One evening, as he sat alone with his wife, recounting the tales of his adventures, the parrot suddenly spoke. In the very cadence of the servant, it chimed, "Habiba, oh Habiba, thee I adore. A love like this, none has known before." Hearing the parrot's voice, the merchant was suddenly seized by a terrible suspicion, a dark cloud of jealousy settling over his heart. Wrongly and unjustly, he accused his wife in his mind of infidelity. In a fit of rash fury, he rushed toward his beloved Habiba, and in one heedless moment, by his own hand, her life was brought to its end. In the aftermath of this gruesome act, driven by his imagined and unfounded conviction of her betrayal, the merchant took the parrot's cage in hand. He called upon his servant, whom he considered a trusted confidant, and together they ventured into the wilderness. After traversing a great distance, they chanced upon a tree beside a running stream. Seeking the solace of shade, the merchant set the cage down. The parrot, having witnessed Habiba's tragic end, remained silent until now. It began to sing the same mournful verse, its musical tone laced with sorrow. Hearing the words echo from the parrot's beak, the merchant buried his head in his hands, shame washing over him as bitter tears spilled forth. The servant, affected by the familiar words that mirrored his own lovelorn murmurs, felt his heart fracture. Gaining his composure, he approached his master to offer solace. "My lord," he inquired gently, "might you share the source of your sorrow? Why embark on this journey without provisions, with the dust of the road still upon you?" The merchant, trusting the servant as an intimate confidant, revealed the entire story, the calamity he had wrought upon his lady in vengeance for her supposed faithlessness. Upon hearing the tale, the servant, who had harbored true affection for Habiba, fell to his knees, beating his head in anguish. His wails and lamentations were so profound that the merchant, momentarily forgetting his own pain, began to comfort him. But it was then that the servant found his voice, laced with reproach. "Why did you act so hastily?" he cried, falling at the merchant's feet. "You should have come and killed me. Draw your blade now, I beg you, and punish me, for your lady was purer than a rose petal. It was I, the fool, who allowed myself to dream of her. When I cleaned your house, while the lady was at her mother's, I was the one humming those lovesick phrases. Woe is me, my lord. Please, let my life come to its end by your hand. Would that my tongue had cleaved to the roof of my mouth, so that your lady would not have been burned in the fire of your jealousy." Upon hearing the servant's confession, the merchant, distraught and panic-stricken, set down the parrot's cage, leaving the servant to his fate as he strode off into the unforgiving desert. There, consumed by grief, he descended into madness, living out his days in the shadows of despair, dying a gradual death. And now, as the tale of the merchant, the servant, and the talking parrot came to an end, King Yunan turned to his vizier, a shadow of anguish crossing his features. "O vizier," he expressed, "I too fear that in destroying the Sage of Ruin I would repeat the merchant's tragic mistake. I dread the pain of regret that could haunt me for the rest of my life, leading me to madness and wandering." The wicked vizier, ever the opportunist, spoke with smooth flattery. "O king, I too am afraid. Yes, I fear that this so-called sage will use his sorcery to harm you, leaving our land of ruin without a ruler. Have you forgotten how he cured your skin disease overnight, an affliction that had tormented you for years?" The insidious insinuations of the vile vizier took root in King Yunan's mind, twisting his thoughts. Fearing for his life at the hands of the Sage of Ruyan, he resolved to silence him by whatever means necessary. The following morn, King Yunan summoned the sage to the palace. As the sage entered, the king inquired, "Do you comprehend why I have summoned you here, outside our customary discourse?" The sage replied, "Nay, for none but God the generous knows the secrets hidden within men's hearts." King Yunan continued, "I have summoned you to instruct that you be brought to judgment and meet the penalty decreed." Upon hearing this, the Sage of Ruyan reflected on his past services and asked, "Is this the reward for kindness?" The king answered, "I am compelled to end your life, for if I do not, you shall seek to take mine." The sage inquired, "Might I ask what is my crime? What transgression have I committed?" King Yunan replied, "I suspect you are a spy, dispatched by my adversaries to infiltrate my court. Moreover, I have learned that with the 3,000 gold coins I provided you, you have enlisted ruffians and scoundrels to rise against me. This is why I have resolved that the fullest penalty must be imposed upon you." The Sage of Ruyan discerned that the wicked vizier had successfully sown seeds of doubt in the king's mind. Realizing it would be futile to dissuade the impressionable monarch with tears or reason, he resorted to cunning. "Since I have no recourse but to submit to your decree," he said, "permit me to return home to set my affairs in order and fetch a most valuable book that I wish to present to you as a gift." Intrigued, King Yunan asked, "What is this book? What wisdom does it hold?" The sage replied, "Its unique property is this: after my death, if you place my head before you and read a few lines from the book, my spirit shall give voice and answer whatsoever you ask. Do you not yearn to receive wise counsel in times of quandary?" Astounded by this claim, King Yunan granted the sage leave to return home, accompanied by 2 guards, to prepare and procure this precious tome. The sage returned home, and for 2 days confined himself within, diligently attending to his work. When at last he returned to King Yunan's palace, he presented the book and a pouch filled with powder. "O king," he proclaimed, "after my end, mix my head with these powders. When the skull has dried and the foul odor dissipates, place it upon a tray before you, read a few lines from the book, and pose any question you wish. You shall receive its answer." The amazed king responded, "First grant me the book, that I may open it and read a few lines whilst you still draw breath." He took the book from the sage's hands, eager to unveil its mysteries, yet, as he opened it, the first page revealed itself to be blank. "Why is this page devoid of writing?" he asked, confusion knitting his brow. The sage replied, The initial pages are intentionally left blank, for they may succumb to the ravages of time. The text begins on the third or fourth page, perhaps even the fifth. The king endeavored to turn the pages, but they were stuck together, refusing to yield to mere fingers. Determined, he moistened his finger with saliva and pried apart the first and second pages. Yet the subsequent pages remained obstinately adhered. Again, he wet his finger, managing to separate the next tightly clenched pages. But as he repeated this for a third time, a cry escaped his lips, and he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The sage of Ruin, having foreseen the king's ingratitude, had infused the pages of the book with a potent poison. Thus the tale reached its tragic conclusion. Whenever one who has been healed shows ingratitude, and whenever one who has received mercy seeks the life of his benefactor, the consequence is dire, as it befell King Yearn. When the tale had reached this point, the fisherman said to the demon within the jar, who, with avid attention, had been listening, "Know then, black-hearted demon, that had the King Yearn not lifted his hand against the wise physician, by whose art he had been restored to health, he would never have fallen into the pitiless snare of vengeance. And you too were minded to treat me as that king devised to treat his healer. Have you forgotten that it was I who drew you forth after 1100 years from your prison in the sea? And why, then, did you set your cruel intent upon my life? By heaven, I will cast you back into the deep, and here on this shore I shall raise my dwelling. To every fisherman who comes hither I will tell the tale of this jar, so that never again, not in 1,000 years, nor in 10,000, will any hand draw you out." At this the demon lifted his voice in lamentation and begged for mercy. From within the jar he wailed, "O man of generous heart, once more practice the virtue of magnanimity. Deliver me from this strait and grievous prison, and I pledge thee a binding oath that never again shall I work thee harm. Nay more, I shall bestow upon thee such abundance of worldly goods that thou shalt live henceforth in ease, untouched by want or need." The fisherman laughed. "You swear an oath, do you? And by what, pray, will you swear?" The demon answered from within, "By Almighty God, I do swear." The fisherman laughed louder still. "You swear by God, have you forgotten your own confession? How when you stood before the prophet Solomon in the company of Asaph son of Barkiah, you rose in defiance and rejected the command of God's own messenger?" The demon groaned, "It is even so. Yet after 1100 years of torment, in darkness and in bondage upon the ocean's floor, I have set my faith in the Most High. By his holy name I do swear that I will not betray thee, nor work thee any harm." Hearing this, the fisherman lifted the lid from the jar. Straightway, as before, a column of smoke poured forth, swelling and rising, until it took the shape of a mighty spirit, who, without pause, set his foot upon the vessel and hurled it far into the sea's depths. The fisherman trembled to see the jar lost to his reach, and fear gripped him lest the demon prove false to his oath. But the spirit laughed and said, "Fear not. By the God in whom thou believest, I also now believe. By him have I sworn, and by him shall I abide. Make thyself ready, for I shall bear thee swiftly through the air, and bestow upon thee a fitting reward." So saying, the demon lifted the fisherman and set him upon his back. With a rush of wings, he mounted to the heavens, flew across a mountain range, and descended at last into a vast plain where lay a shimmering pool. There he set the fisherman down and said, Behold this pool before thee, filled with fishes of 4 colors. So long as I am with thee, cast thy net. The fisherman cast, and drew forth 4 fishes, one as red as coral, another golden as minted coin, a third white as new fallen snow, and the last blue as the heavens at dusk. Take these, said the demon, carry them to the king of this realm, he will pay thee richly, and thou shalt want for nothing. Each day thou mayest return and cast thy net, and so shalt thou prosper. And now I pray thee forgive me, for 1100 years alone in the depths have robbed me of my wits. With that he vanished into the air, leaving no trace behind. The fisherman, following the demon's counsel, slung the 4 fishes in his bag and made his way to the palace. At the gate he said to the guards, "Announce to the king that I bring him fishes of 4 wondrous colors, red, yellow, white, and blue." So they ushered him into the royal presence. The king, marveling at the sight, commanded that 400 gold pieces be given to the man, and said to his vizier, "Ask his name, so that when we desire such marvels again, we may summon him." And turning to his attendants he added, "Take these fishes to the handmaiden whom the Emperor of Rome sent me but yesterday. Bid her prepare them for my table." The fisherman, rejoicing, pocketed his gold and went on his way. Now the maiden of Rome, new to the palace and this day entrusted with her first dish, placed the pan upon the fire. When the oil bubbled, she slipped the 4 fishes in. But scarcely had she done so when the wall of the kitchen cracked open, and through the gap stepped a girl of surpassing beauty, with a cane of green reed in her hand. She struck the pan with it and said, in a voice sweet as dawn's first breath, O fishes, do you remember the covenant of old?" And lo, the fishes raised their heads and spoke as with one tongue, "We remember." The girl struck the pan again so that it overturned, and the fishes fell half-cooked upon the floor. At once the Roman maiden swooned away, and the girl passed back through the rift, which closed behind her. When the handmaiden recovered, she saw the pan overturned, and the fishes ruined, and, knowing her first task in the palace was in shambles, she wept bitterly. The vizier, fearing the king's impatience, came hastily to the kitchen. When he found her in tears, he asked what had occurred. Hearing her tale, and being long accustomed to strange enchantments in the court, he gave orders at once that another dish be prepared for the king. At dawn the following morning, the sultan, whose curiosity had only sharpened overnight, summoned the fisherman once more and demanded 4 fishes of the same colors he had presented the day before: red as coral, yellow as beaten gold, white as mountain snow, and blue as the evening sky. Dutifully, the man obeyed, casting his net into the enchanted pond, and returning with 4 creatures so bright in hue they seemed almost painted by an idol god. Once again, the vizier pressed 400 gold coins into his roughened hands, and the fisherman, scarcely able to believe his luck, took the road homeward with a heart as light as his purse was heavy, for in 2 short days he had amassed a fortune of 800 coins, a sum of which, not a week before, he would not have dreamt even in sleep. The vizier, meanwhile, handed the gleaming fishes to the Roman girl, and addressed her in a tone that mingled severity with the faintest suggestion of indulgence. "Had anyone but I overheard your tale of yesterday, child, you would have been condemned outright or sold off in the slave market for a paltry price. But I chose restraint. Now I bring you 4 more fishes. Yet today I shall hide myself in this kitchen corner and see for myself whether your story was truth or mere incompetence." The girl, blushing, set the pan upon the fire, and poured in the oil. When it hissed and spat, she dropped in the 4 fishes, and once more the kitchen wall cracked apart like a split fig. Again, the radiant maiden stepped forth, reed wand in hand, her voice gentle as dawn. O fishes! O fishes! Do ye yet remember the covenant sworn in ancient days? And the fishes, writhing in the seething oil, answered with a single voice, Yes, yes, we remember, and we abide by our oath. The maiden struck the pan a second time, it overturned, the fishes fell upon the tiles, and she, as before, vanished through the fissure in the wall, which closed upon her, like the lips of one who keeps a secret. The vizier, who had witnessed all with his own eyes, trembled in wonder. His doubt gave way to conviction. The Roman slave had spoken nothing but truth. Still shaken, he hastened to the audience chamber and recounted everything, what he had heard the day before and what he himself had now seen. The Sultan, listening, pursed his lips and said, I believe you, but my heart insists upon seeing it for myself. The matter is too fantastic to be accepted by hearsay. So, for the 3rd time, they sent for the fisherman. As soon as he appeared, the Sultan himself bestowed 400 more gold coins upon him and said, Go at once and bring me 4 more of these wondrous fishes, such as you have brought these 2 days past. The fisherman departed, half in fear, half in rapture, for by now he had received 1,200 gold pieces, an unthinkable treasure to a man who had never seen 12 in his life. He hurried to the pool, drew his net, and returned with 4 more fishes, bright as ever, which he laid reverently before the Sultan. The Sultan commanded, There is no need that I should go to the kitchen. Make ready a fire here in the hall itself. Let the slave girl bring oil and pan, and let her repeat before my very eyes what has twice been done already. So it was arranged. The fire crackled, the oil bubbled, and the 4 fishes were laid upon it. Then, once again, the wall split apart. But this time, not the dazzling maiden appeared, but a hideous black slave, coarse of feature, brutish in form, and armed not with a slender reed, but a heavy cudgel. He strode into the hall without so much as a glance at Sultan, vizier, or trembling girl, and struck the pan with his stick, bellowing, O fishes! O fishes! Do ye yet remember your oath of old? And the fishes, scorched and sputtering, answered as before, Yea, yea, we are faithful to our oath. Then, with a blow of his cudgel, he overturned the pan, sending the fishes tumbling across the marble floor, and vanished into the same fissure, which sealed behind him. The Sultan, beholding this monstrous apparition, was seized at once by awe and dread. For a while he could not even speak, so tightly did fear bind his tongue. The girl, as on the previous days, fell senseless to the floor. At last the Sultan, recovering his voice, turned to the vizier and said in tones sharp with suspicion, All this must spring from that wretched fisherman. Send men after him at once. The order was scarcely given when the fisherman was dragged into the hall. Still flushed with hope of receiving yet another purse of coins, he started in confusion at the sight of the executioner, who appeared at the Sultan's gesture with drawn sword. A tremor ran through him, and he thought to himself in terror, So this is the revenge of the accursed demon. He has contrived to bring me to my death. The Sultan, his face dark with wrath, cried out, You are a sorcerer. For 3 days you have deceived me with your beguiling fishes and lured demons and magicians into my palace. Now you shall pay with your head. The fisherman, pale and shaking, stammered, "My lord, what offense have I committed? If I have taken from you 1,200 gold coins, it was only at your command, and indeed I have scarcely spent a groat of it. Gladly will I return all to you, spare me, for I am innocent." The vizier, whose shrewdness was equal to his caution, bent to the sultan's ear and whispered, "Majesty, it seems plain this fellow knows nothing of the matter. Ask him only where he finds such fishes, and the truth will come clear." So the sultan questioned him, and the fisherman, in fear of death, told the tale from beginning to end, of the demon, the enchanted pawn, and the bargain struck. Sultan and vizier alike listened closely, and in the end were persuaded he spoke truth. Then the sultan asked, "And how far lies this pond from my palace?" The fisherman answered, "Behind the mountain yonder, lord. With half a day's walk I reach it easily." The sultan's brow furrowed. He knew his dominions too well to believe such a claim. The distance must be greater, he thought, but the vizier, ever prudent, said, "It may be, sire, that fear makes him conceal the truth, or else that by sorcery he travels a road that others cannot see." Thus resolved, the sultan ordered a small company to be prepared. The fisherman was kept close in the palace that night, and at dawn he set out with sultan, vizier, and guard. For 3 days and nights they marched, over 4 mountains, until at last they came upon the very pond, glittering like a mirror of colored fire in the wilderness. When the sultan saw it with his own eyes, and the fishes swimming within in hues no artist could contrive, he turned to his vizier and said softly, "Here I shall sit alone and seek to learn the secret of these creatures. Pitch the tents at a distance, that none but you may see my signal, should danger threaten. As for the army, let them know nothing of this matter." But when the king returned to the lakeside, the sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the air was heavy with the quickening gloom of evening. Desiring to take the measure of that broad and silent water, he drew his sword from its scabbard. Whether from prudence or from habit, he could not have said, and set off northwards along the eastern bank. Presently, in the deepening shadow, he perceived a dim outline, and advancing cautiously discerned, to his astonishment, the form of a palace towering into the night sky. What puzzled him most was why, in the clear light of day, such an edifice had wholly escaped his notice. He came to the rear of its walls, and what walls they were, one brick fashioned of pure gold, the next of veined marble, alternating with a splendor so fantastical it might well have been the whimsy of a dream. Round and round he went, calling out in a loud voice to summon the inhabitants, but there came no answer. The palace had 2 massive iron gates, one facing north, the other south, both standing wide upon their hinges. He struck each with its knocker. Silence replied. Once more he circled the vast enclosure, and at last, through the northern gate, set behind the lake itself, he entered. Still he called, still there was no response. Within, the king found himself in a hall of such magnificence as surpassed anything he had known, either in the chronicles of his reign or in the reports of foreign lands. He wandered for a while, marveling, until fatigue pressed upon him, and he sat down in a corner to ease his weariness. Rising again, he discovered himself in yet another chamber, its floor laid with brocaded carpets, a fountain at its center. At each corner of the basin crouched a lion, cast in red gold, and from the mouths of those lions there issued not water, but streams of pearls and precious stones that clattered into the pool with an opulence that mocked utility. Then suddenly, borne upon the silence, there came to his ears the sound of a human voice. He halted, listening. A man was chanting verses, the words heavy with sorrow.
No fortune has freed me, the heavens turn away. Sorrow follows city streets, a shadow I can't sway.
The king rose and followed the sound, and soon discerned that it issued from behind a curtain that hung at the far end of the chamber. Drawing it aside, he beheld a staircase of white marble ascending to an upper gallery. Mounting the steps, he came into another hall, whose walls were fashioned wholly of gold. In the center hung a couch suspended by chains, swaying gently in the still air, and upon it sat a young man of comely aspect, dignified and mild of countenance. The king, supposing that he stood before some spirit of the air, murmured the name of God upon his lips and advanced, giving greeting. The young man returned his salutation courteously, and with a grace that bespoke noble birth, though he begged pardon that he could not rise in honor of his guest. Then, drawing aside a cloth of woven gold that covered his knees, he revealed that both his legs were turned to stone. With a voice full of gentleness he said, "Tell me, O traveler, by what fortune you have come to this place." The king, marveling greatly, recounted to him the tale of the fisherman, the dread spirit, and the 4 fishes of many colors. When he had ended, the young man sighed and said, "Know then, O king, that the lake of which you speak, and those fishes within it, have a story of their own. Strange indeed is that tale, yet if you have patience to hear, I shall unfold it to you. These plains through which you passed, and that lake you beheld, were once a fair and prosperous kingdom over which my father ruled. For more than 70 years he governed with justice and mercy, until, when his appointed time was come, he died, leaving me his crown and throne. Beyond the northeastern mountains, beyond the borders of Taharistan, lay the land of the demons. By what wisdom or sorcery my father kept them from our realm I know not, yet often he would say, 'So long as I live, these fiends shall not set foot within my dominion,' and indeed, in his days, they dared not. When I succeeded him, I kept faithful watch upon the frontiers. I had then a cousin, a maiden of great beauty, though I had never seen her father, my uncle, for my own sire spoke little of him. Once he said the man had turned demon and perished, again, that he had fallen in battle with them. Yet I loved my cousin dearly, and 40 days after my father's death, I took her to wife. In the first months of our union, her affection was so fervent that I marveled at it. Never would she eat or drink save in my presence, nor could she endure to be parted from me even for an hour. Thus 5 years passed in apparent bliss. My father had founded his realm upon such firm justice, and his ministers were men of such prudence and loyalty, that I was spared all care of governance. One summer's eve, when the heat was great, my wife would go to the bath. She bade the steward of the palace prepare the evening meal that she might find it ready on her return. That day my affairs were quickly ended, and I came home 2 or 3 hours earlier than was my custom. Being weary, I resolved to rest a while, and because of the sultriness of the air I ordered 2 handmaids to fan me, one at my head and one at my feet. But though I lay with eyes closed, sleep would not come, and the maidens, thinking me lost in slumber, began softly to converse. Then said one to the other, "Alas for our noble master! How grievous that so gentle and virtuous a prince should be bound to a woman whose heart is as dark as her beauty is radiant. One of the maidservants said, "By God, such a woman is no fit consort for our Lord." The other answered, lowering her voice, "Indeed, she slips nightly into the bedchambers of strange men and keeps vigil with them until dawn. Do you not know? Why does our Lord not prevent her?" The first asked. "He knows or not," the second whispered. "Each night she sprinkles a little opium into his cup. He sinks into such a drugged sleep that he does not stir till morning, and in those few hours of stupor she commits her shameful acts." I listen. That very night, when to all appearance I awoke from slumber, I gave the two girls leave and lay in wait for my cousin's return. When the board was spread for supper and the servants had left my wife and me alone, she brought two goblets and placed one by me and one before herself. Taking advantage of a moment's carelessness, I cast away the cup she had laced with opium, though she imagined I had drained it. I then stretched myself upon the couch and feigned sleep. She, thinking the drug had taken effect as in nights past, muttered under her breath, "Sleep on, may you never rise," rose, changed her robes, arrayed herself, and slipped from the palace. In the dark I followed her, shadow to shadow, until after some distance she entered a humble, mud-built cottage. She went inside. I sprang upon its roof and peered through a gap in the chimney. I wish I had not watched, for there I saw my wife bowing before a black slave, ugly and repulsive. The man, abusive at her delay, heaped insults upon her. She answered, "Forgive me, my lord, forgive me. This fellow kept me waiting." He raged all the more, seized a whip, tore her garments, and beat her with the lash. She wailed beneath his blows and begged for mercy. I could endure it no longer. Drawing a cloth across my face, I loosened my sword in its sheath and leapt down from the roof. With a cry, I burst into the hut. The woman fled at once, never guessing who I was. The black slave, struck dumb with terror, stood rooted to the ground. I rushed upon him, and in that moment his fate was decided, and his life was ended before he could gather his wits. Fool that I was! Thinking a single blow would put an end to the villainy, and trusting that the death of that brute would sober my wife, I carried myself back to the palace and pretended to sleep. She returned in black raiments and lay down. In the morning, I asked why she wore mourning. She lied. "They told me 2 of my brothers were bitten by serpents and died at once," she said, "and I wear black for their sake." I, who knew she wore black for the death of the wicked slave, said nothing. I would watch how this stratagem would run its course. The next day she asked leave to build a poor little hut at the far end of the palace garden, saying she could there grieve in private and not bring her sorrow into the house. Though my love for her was still keen, suspicion and hatred were kindling in my heart, yet I permitted it. She built the hut and, as a sham of mourning, placed the black slave, who, contrary to my belief, was not truly dead but grievously wounded, within a coffin-like box, and carried that mock bier into the pretended mourning house, as if it were the tomb of her 2 serpent-bitten brothers. I had means of learning the truth. Messengers from the neighboring country, where my cousins dwelt, reported that they were alive and unbitten. The black slave's wound, though grievous from my stroke, was not of the sort to mend overnight, and my faithless cousin daily, under pretext of mourning, went into that false mourning house to tend the slave and bind his wounds. I watched her from afar, moment by moment. When I saw that my treacherous wife and the ungrateful cousin had not ceased their vile acts, fury boiled in me. Burning with rage and resolve to end both their offenses, I took up my sword and, with murder in my mind, entered the little mourning hut. When I entered the hut, my faithless wife no sooner beheld me than she gave a cry and shrieked, "So it was you who struck the blow that wounded my master's neck?" Before I could advance, she uttered an incantation and breathed upon me. My sword fell from my hand and clattered to the ground. I stood before her helpless, as a child stands before its nurse. Taking me by the hand, she led me into this very chamber, wherein you now behold me, murmured another spell, and poured a bowl of water over my head, whereupon my flesh hardened, and I became as you see, living still, yet turned to stone. Then, her voice hoarse with fury, she cried, "Though I am your cousin, know that I am of the race of demons and ifrits. My father, who was also your uncle, had joined their kind before ever I was born. When your father learned that his brother had turned from the ways of men and chosen the path of the spirits, he slew him. I, in vengeance for my father's blood, took you to husband, and for that blood I deal thus with you. Now shall you live, yet as stone, upon this suspended throne. Every evening I shall come and lash you with my whip, to avenge alike my father's death, and the wound you gave to my beloved slave." When he had reached this part of his tale, he said, "Such, O Lord, is my story. Thus was I bewitched by my cousin's sorcery." And he went on, saying, "So fierce was her wrath, and so potent her art, that she turned the great and prosperous city under my rule into the lake you have seen. Its people, who were of four faiths, Hindu, Zoroastrian, Jewish, and Buddhist, she transformed into fishes of four colors, each kind after its creed. From that day till now, she comes here every evening, first to scourge me till I swoon from pain, then to go and tend the black slave, dressing the wound in his neck as though it were some sacred relic." When he had finished speaking, the king said gently, "Be at peace. I shall lift the enchantment that binds you and your people." He rose and went to the place where the wounded slave lay. With swift resolve, he brought the man's life to an end and had the body removed from the chamber. Then the king returned, set aside his royal garments, and clothed himself in the slave's plain attire. He lay down upon the couch with his back turned toward the door and waited in silence. Before long, the woman returned, carrying food and healing balms, for she had already dealt harshly with her husband. Seeing the figure resting upon the couch, she said, "Why does my lord turn his back upon his handmaid this night?" The king, who had noted the slave's rough accent, answered in the same tongue and tone, "I am weary of you. My wound heals not, for each day, when you flog your husband, his cries and curses pierce my soul and hinder my recovery. Were he silent, I might soon be well." She asked, "What would you have me do?" He answered, still in the slave's voice, "Go at once. Break the spell that binds him, and send him away from here, that he trouble us no more." But even the craftiest witch is a fool when love and rage have clouded her mind. She hastened away, performed the counter-charm, and so released her husband from the spell. Then she returned. The king spoke again, still in the slave's guise. "The people of that city, whom you turned into fishes, rise from the water each night and curse me. I can bear their reproaches no longer. Go, dry the lake, and restore the city and its people to their former state." She went, and after a time returned, saying, "It is done. The city stands as before, and the fishes are again men and women. What now is your will?" Then the king rose swiftly, turned toward her, and ended her life before she could speak again. Her treachery was brought to a final reckoning, and she was removed from the world she had darkened. Thus the palace and the garden alike were freed from her presence, and her enchantments were undone forever. Straightway he came to the young man, now freed from the enchantment, and they embraced one another, their hearts overflowing with joy. When at length the king would have taken leave and returned to his own realm, the young man said, "I will go with you. This kingdom and all that belongs to it I bestow upon you, in gratitude for what you have done for me and for my people. From this day forth, you shall be sovereign of both our lands." The king accepted, and they journeyed together to his dominion, uniting the two realms and joining their peoples in lasting brotherhood. After some days had passed, the king sent for the fisherman and said to him, "All that has come to pass came by reason of your faith and honesty. Therefore, you and your family shall dwell in my palace." The fisherman came with his wife, his son, and his 2 daughters. The king and the young man each took one of the daughters to wife, and for 7 days and nights they held a feast of joy and music. The fisherman's son was made commander of the royal armies, and the 2 kings lived in happiness and splendor beside their young brides for many years. And whenever the fisherman thought upon the dread spirit, he would murmur to himself, "Of all the demons in the world, I met but one who kept his word. And perhaps I alone have seen 2 kings content within a single realm, for in this alone that old proverb is proved false. 2 dervishes may sleep beneath one cloak, but 2 kings cannot dwell within one kingdom." Thus ended the tale of the fisherman and the demon.